We're going to start with some of the easier stuff that we can get through. One of those things is actually going to be a perfect place for me to exhibit what I mean by know your place when it comes to me. And that is that last week on Monday night, we had the ARPA funds passed at the town meeting. So all of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that had been voted on and approved for to pass on to you, the voter, to you, the electorate, from town council and from the Board of Finance, was passed on to that town meeting that you all could have participated in. And there were about 80 or so people in the room. So there was a lot of people there. And all of these funds passed. Now, again, this is the third tranche. I have them on display right now. You can see them. The link to all of this is at the top of your screen. I'll put a link in this video's description to where you can see that agenda and you can see what passed as far as this third tranche is concerned. And all of these funds have now been approved finally. So this is the final step in the process for the approval of these funds, which again, don't just come from the town council. They come from you, the voter, right? And again, speaking in my opinion on these sort of things, to know my place, number one, I've never really spoken at town council about these things. And it's not just a matter of technical feasibility with what I do at town council when it comes to live broadcast of these meetings, and it being difficult to do that and also go to the podium in an organized and neat manner. It's really, really, really hard for me to do that, but that's not the argument I'm making. I know that when I first proposed what ought to be done with these funds, I know that the libertarian take on this thing that I proposed was super fringe minority. And that I knew, too, that the town council and that a lot of these governing bodies and a lot of members of the governing bodies still live by the policy of the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. And that is a wildly inappropriate thing to do in a representative system of government. 5 people in the room saying one thing and there not being another person in the room to say the opposite, that is not how business should be conducted. The members of town council were elected to these positions. Now, in fairness, 3 of them were winners by default elected to those positions and lost in colossal landslides, which is a point we're going to come back to later in the show. Again, knowing your place. But for me to have gone to the podium and said, the only thing that I'm even might consider supporting, the only thing I might even consider voting in favor of as being, and we've talked about this on the show a lot, as being let me find the exact dollar amount. The deferral, here it is. Item number 7, New Milford sewer abatement, $136,000. This is effectively a 2-year moratorium on connection fees to the New Milford sewer plant. And I explained in the last episode why I could build a case to be in favor of that sort of thing when it comes to this sort of expenditure. And quite frankly, again, I would have voted against every single one of these line items if I was on town council, except maybe that one. Maybe that one. And I've told you why that's the case. But the reason I haven't gone to the podium and said, I want you guys to vote no, because I know that the arguments I make are really, really fringe in this case. I know that they were incredibly unpopular. I know that you guys are coming around to them now. And that I was right. And hey, there were a lot of people that said I was a kook and a crank at the beginning. But I think you guys are kind of coming on board with what I was saying about how this is money that was stolen from you in the first place and should be just given back to you. And the best way to do that under the law, which is still legal, seemed to have been at the time to me to just establish a nonprofit homeschool vouchering program. Right? And just have the nonprofit association dole out vouchers for homeschooling. And I gave the rationale about why that was in some way related to COVID-19. I gave that rationale. That rationale is significantly more consistent with the idea of tying things to COVID-19 than a lot of these other expenditures that were ostensibly tied to COVID-19 in certain places. But at the same time, I knew my place. I knew that the arguments that I made are arguments I can make here on my show, but that when I go to the formal setting of town council, which is a formal setting, I can get away with F-bombs by accident on this show. I can't get away with F-bombs by accident at town council. That's inappropriate. That's truly inappropriate. But I also know that me going to that podium and saying that thing, there are people in the room that will say, oh, well, 3 people say one thing, 2 people say the other thing. That's not how this works. Thousands and thousands and thousands of New Milford voters in November of 2021, cast their vote. And that vote was largely on the faith that that the voters had and the people that are getting elected to these positions, especially town council, to conduct that business. In the case of the town council, the thing that people are voting on, whether they realize it or not, is their faith in the councilmen and their abilities to exhibit quality value judgment. Because a lot of these issues, a lot of these topics are things you don't know that you're going to run into when you're getting elected. The people that are casting votes in November of 2021 aren't casting a vote on something like the border wall, aren't casting a vote on things like international immigration, things that are going to continue to be a topic of discussion for decades and decades and decades. Really, the only major topic of discussion you're going into when you're casting your vote in November of every odd year is the budget. That's just about it. And we're going to come back to that. Believe me, that we're going to come back to the budget in just a quick second. But the point is that when I was making these arguments on this show, I knew that there were people in the room that weren't going to do the appropriate thing, which is to say, here's what the scoreboard of voters showed when it was thousands of voters, when everyone had the opportunity to go to the poll and cast a vote. Here's what they said. And in short, and we're going to bring this number back up, in short, they said 73-27. In short, they said Wilt Chamberlain versus a bunch of middle schoolers, right? In short, it was a slam dunk one way and not the other. It was an absolute indictment on one of those two parties. In a town where there are more Democrats than there are Republicans, in a town where there are more registered Democrats than Republicans, no Republican mayoral candidate should win 73-27, unless that isn't an indictment on the DTC leadership cast by the Democrats of this town, which I've said it 1,000 times. 1,000 times. There are Democrats in this town I would vote for today, right? And I don't think that the majority of Democrats in this town are the people that I'm going to put into this category of the radicals within the DCC leadership ranks, and that it's, again, 5 or 6 people that even Democrats in this town have a problem with. So that was me exhibiting knowing my place, exhibiting knowing that the squeakiest wheel shouldn't get the grease.